Sunny days are here again.
It has been actually quite
I
lovely.
just sort of improv.
Relatively cold as Indiana in March goes.
How what temperatures do you have down there?
I think it's like 30 something right now.
Dang, we were 20 degrees warmer than you today. It was about 50 degrees. So
Okay.
it's been consistently nice for the last few days, so I'm digging it. Even though I have
Okay, very
job.
nice.
a job inside with my office has no windows. There is a window, but it looks out to the hallway. I think we've discussed this before.
Well, here's the thing: the temperature outside is nice, but it's at a transitional inflection point, like between too cold to wear a winter coat and pants early in the morning when I'm working at UPS, and too hot to wear a winter coat and Carhartt
Well,
bibs
that and then
to
like
work in the morning.
this time of year, and then like in like the early fall too, when it starts to get chillier, it's like the buildings all have their heat cranked up on campus because it seems like there's only hot or cold in those two buildings, or in those buildings. Those are the only two settings, and so like you walk in, and then you have to like take your coat off, and then you go outside, and it's kind of warm enough to wear a coat, kind of not. It's in between, yeah. It's kind of a weird part of the year. Middle of the winter, you can just leave your coat on the whole time.
Right. And honestly, easing into winter, you tend to wear less. You kind of
Are
grit your
gradually-
teeth and
You're gradually accumulating the layers as they are necessary.
right. But I think it takes longer. There's like a period of time where it's like if you're getting colder, you will not wear a jacket or a coat in that temperature.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's getting warmer, you'll continue to wear a coat in that temperature.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Or just don't wear a coat the whole time like some people.
I mean, or wear shorts the whole season like some people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody on this podcast.
Certainly
no.
not this podcast.
Have
Couldn't be me.
Have you figured out liturgical shorts? Or
Liturgical shorts are a big no.
oh
But
no,
clerical shorts.
clerical
Shorts, however, are a different matter.
Because then you just
okay.
have black slacks, right?
Yeah, you just have black shorts.
There you go.
And in general, I think you shouldn't wear shorts when you're doing priest stuff. But
yeah.
I'm gonna make an exception when you're having like an outdoor picnic,
Oh sure.
and it's gonna be more than an hour. Like if you're doing a vacation Bible school in the middle of July and you have to
Yeah.
be out there for an extended period of time, I am gonna be all about clerical shorts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think, and then like in some parts of the world too, or like in the tropics, I feel like those are pretty common just because,
You kind of have to dress for the weather.
yeah. Gotta dress for that weather though.
That weather.
I'm gonna miss squinting at John down the hallways. Sounds like his student teaching is gonna be up soon. I was hoping like, dang, it'd be nice if he could work at Shanley and then we could eat lunch or something in the lunchroom because I have no other reason to eat lunch. Actually, I haven't been eating lunch lately because I'm trying to.
That's
Kinda.
why leftovers are taking so long to
Yeah.
deplete, and I've been
I'm
carrying.
like, I
the
don't
weight.
move as much, so I'm just going to eat less if I want to lose weight. But then I end up like, I still end up eating like normal size, like dinners and whatnot. But we produce leftovers more than we eat them these days with this number of people in this part of the country, localized entirely in our kitchen.
And without one of the 80th percentile eaters in the house.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess how is seminary going in the last week or so?
Oh, it's been a very busy week. Much to do.
Do you guys
Not
have
enough time to do it.
like midterms?
It's
or
about
anything?
midterm season right now. And I haven't actually had any of my midterms yet. But I had like 100 pages of Summa to read this week,
Oh dang.
and I had a presentation in 2 different classes, and we had our annual phonathon, meaning that I have to call 30 people up to 3 times and ask them to give us money.
Those are always fun.
Normally, in a non-COVID year, that would be done like you sit down for 3 hours on a Tuesday night and slog through it. But this year, we obviously can't be that close together, and there's just not enough space for that. So they had us all do it from our cell phones, which is obviously a great idea.
Yeah.
Oh, clearly.
Because area codes.
And I have a Colorado area code, and we have never had people from Colorado come to St. Meinrad. Why would they when, they have a theology school in Denver?
Yeah. And a completely different archdiocese in Denver.
Well, we used to have seminarians from like Washington State and California and stuff, so and New Mexico. So Meinrad has had guys from all over the place, really, but
Interesting.
Colorado is not one of them.
Evidently not.
Duluth and New Ulm used to send here as well.
Sure.
Where do they send them now? Like St. Thomas or what?
Yeah, SPS. St. Paul's Seminary in St. Paul.
Nah, I gotcha. Suppose it's closer.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
I could throw a rock at the St. Thomas as I drive here down I-94 through Minneapolis.
Yep. Is that sort of is that like kind of on the east side of Minneapolis? Okay. I've only really been like downtown or like the west side. I've been to St. Paul a little bit, but not a ton. It was, I think speaking of Catholic colleges, there was one time with the legendary Ben on the trip with Emma and Colton when we took out there, where we were just walking around in a park and then we rounded a corner and I was like, oh, that's St. Scholastica College right there. I had no idea that was in Duluth, but okay. The more you learn, I guess, walking around random parks, hopping back and forth in a Sweer Subaru. Anything new with you, Nathan, that Riley doesn't know about?
Not a lot. I got paperwork that I needed to fill out to be a godfather for 2 of my little cousins, which is pretty great. So I needed to have a priest sign and stamp it to say, hey, this kid's Catholic, by the way. I'm an actual priest.
Going to be.
Right. No, I'm
Oh, you're Catholic.
The godfather in question will be is Catholic.
Yes.
Because that would be a problem if you were
Yeah.
baptizing him into the Catholic faith, and that wasn't so right. So they need that authentication. Anyway, so I was talking to Monsignor at the Newman Center, and we couldn't find the parish seal. So it's like, yeah, I'll get that back to you in a week.
Oh gosh.
Like, okay. At
I
least it
wouldn't
isn't
even
until
know-
like April
begin
when
to
the
know like where that would have been.
right. Well, we our our secretary it should be in her office, but she's not there because she's not working there anymore.
Well, that and she doesn't work Fridays normally, does she?
Not
Did she?
usually, no.
Yeah.
But she doesn't work any Fridays here anymore. She
Yeah, that's
left.
true. No, they've sort of that's going to be a whole big thing.
It will be a whole big thing.
Getting a
There's-
new business manager and for a new building and new a lot of new things.
a lot of new stuff.
No.
No.
Anyway, so like other than that, I mean, I'm still just plugging away at my classes. They're tough. There's a lot of math. I worked out with my lab partner for senior design. We're making a door alarm that if you leave it open for a minute, it'll buzz. And so we got that final design finished and prototyped and approved and stuff.
There you go.
So now we got to draft the printed circuit board layout. So that'll be good. I don't know. That's the thing.
We finished WandaVision today.
Oh, very nice.
It was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the beginning and middle of the show interested me more just because there was more mystery.
Yeah.
But then, like, after the last 2 episodes, very much like, okay, this is where the curtain comes off and we just close it out. It's like, okay, that's cool.
Yep.
But it didn't, like, engage me the way the rest of the series
Yeah, the
did.
build-up, it wasn't anticlimactic. The build-up was more exciting than the finale, I feel like. Because by the time you get to the finale, it's like, okay, I see what they're going to do here.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
So is it just done there, or are they doing additional seasons?
It looks like it'll be a one-and-done thing. The
Yeah.
story that WandaVision was trying to tell is very much over.
But Wanda's arc continues apace.
Right. She'll show up in other MCU projects and stuff. It just won't be in WandaVision form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I'm cool with one-offs being a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I don't mind a miniseries. It's easier to go back and rewatch and appreciate.
Yeah, honestly, there could probably be more miniseries instead of shows that start out as like miniseries-esque and then balloon out into multiple seasons because, ooh, we got money. We can do more with this.
Yeah, that's what happened to Stranger Things. They should have put that to bed after season 2.
Yeah, I think like at the end of season 2 is when I sort of started. I was like, okay, I wish they would just wrap it up here, but I know they're not going to. Season 3 was, I feel like we've talked about this before, but season 3 was.
We might have.
It was probably early in the podcast because that's when
We're certainly in the habit of beating dead horses.
Yeah.
We
Speaking of dead horses, we're the Palladium.
I'm
James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
And what segment are we doing today?
We're doing gregarious games. We remembered this time.
Yay.
And there may often be dead horses in this game we're talking about this week. It is Red Dead Redemption 2. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen.
Red Dead Horse Redemption 2.
Yes. Although I actually managed to get through the whole game without killing any of my horses.
Or any cats?
What's that?
Did you kill any cats?
This is a reference to when he played what? Witcher?
The Witcher, yeah. No, I didn't
Yes.
find any. I did pet lots of dogs.
Well, that's obligatory in
Yes.
in RDR2.
Yeah,
You must pet the doggo because
I
it's
don't
an
recall.
option available to you.
yeah, I don't recall seeing any cats. But regardless, maybe there were some and I just didn't know where to look.
Barnes
Maybe.
and Noble.
Yes, Nathan.
You're welcome.
So yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2, which most people probably know, is made by Rockstar Games, who are known for the other Red Dead games. There's Red Dead
Really?
Revolver.
They made other games other than Red Dead Redemption 2?
Yeah.
There was one before Red Dead Redemption 2?
There was 2 before, actually. It was
Wow.
Red Dead Revolver and Red Dead Redemption, the first one, which came out in 2010. This one came out in 2018.
They're best known for doing Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft
though.
Auto, yeah, that series, and then this, and I think the L.A. Noir.
They did L.A. Noir.
Yep.
They did a game called Bully. They did a couple other stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not talking about those today.
This is their most recent big game that they've made, relatively speaking. So it follows the story of your character Arthur Morgan. It's a prequel to the first Red Dead. So you are sort of the not right-hand man, but like one of the top-ranking members of Dutch van der Linde's gang, and this is set in sort of a fictional 1890s tail end of the Wild West America. So the different areas of the maps, it's an open world game, so usually open world games will have like different biomes, as it were. And so each of the biomes or states are like fictional states that represent different regions of the US. So you have your Arizona, California deserts. You have your sort of mountainous, rocky, like Utah types, and then there's this one southern state, which is sort of, vaguely the South. There's a city in there that looks kind of like what you imagine New Orleans would, and northern and mountain and different things like that. You kind of get the picture. So it's sort of a snapshot of America in the 1890s. So the game picks up where the gang is on the run after a job gone bad, where they're ambushed by Pinkerton agents who was like sort of a private detective agency that the government would pay to like chase after criminals. So they are doing a job robbing a bank in Blackwater, but it was a setup, and the Pinkerton agents ambushed them and they escaped, but a few of the people died or were arrested in the process. So they escape into the mountains and kind of gradually, work their way to a town, and they think, they've lost the trail of the law. So basically, how the game goes is that your gang, which is composed of you and then like the different hired guns, but also there's like a number of women and a couple and one of the gang members' kids that are also part of the crew. So it's sort of a traveling band, and so like everybody plays a part in maintaining the camp, and it's at the beginning of the game it's kind of a family feel to it. They sort of, Dutch is this very idealistic, self-styled noble outlaw, and he sort of has this not virtuous magnanimity to him, but yeah, he's always got a big plan. He's constantly scheming for the next big score, and since the law has kind of been on their tail, they're trying to get enough money so they can escape out west or somewhere, maybe even out of the country, so they can continue to live lives free out in the open nature as God intended, as it were, because it's the 1890s and civilization is starting to slowly creep from the east coast out west, and there's not a whole lot of wide open country anymore these days. So they're trying to get away from that. So the gang will camp in these different regions and try to do things like go bounty hunting or pick up odd jobs here and there, while they scout for a place to rob and get this big score so they can get out of Dodge, as it were. But every time they do this, things go kind of wrong. And they draw the attention of the Pinkerton agents who get on their trail, and then they have to pick up and move, and the process repeats. Over time, at the beginning of the game, most of the people in the gang still believe in Dutch as the leader. But as things continue to go wrong, one by one, gang members kind of start to lose their faith in Dutch as the leader. And Arthur, this is sort of embodied obviously mainly through the character you play, who's Arthur Morgan, and his interactions with the other people in the gang will depend on where your honor's at, which I'll get into later. So yeah, one job goes wrong very much in the same way Blackwater's did, in that the Pinkerton agents were waiting for them at this bank in the city of Saint Denis, which is sort of a Louisiana city. And so they're ambushed by these agents, and they barely escape with their lives. And the gang is sort of scattered, and so they're kind of every man for themselves. And a few of the gang members have died along the way, and a few more die or get captured, including John Marston, who is the main character in the next game. He gets captured. So the gang splits up. There's this weird sort of tangent mission where Dutch and Arthur and a few of the other guys try to escape on a ship, and they get shipwrecked in Cuba, and then there's this whole thing. It's sort of it was fun, but it was sort of random, and not really consequential to the main story. But the gang sort of slowly reunites, but it's pretty evident that the cracks that have formed in the gang are stuff is going to hit the fan pretty quick here. And Arthur, over time, is becoming more and more disillusioned with the gang. Now, one of the gang members is this German named Herr Strauss, and his whole deal is he goes around and basically through usury makes the gang money, and so he'll target people who are desperate for loans, and he'll borrow them at what seems like a great rate, but then he'll send Arthur after them to collect, and beat them up and that sort of thing. One of the people you're sent to collect from is coughing and or something, and so you beat him up within an inch of his life, and he gives you the money, but in the process, you get tuberculosis from this dude. And so down the road, like over the course of the game, like as time progresses through the different chapters, the your character starts coughing a little bit more and more here and there until it finally comes to a head where he passes out, and then he gets taken to a doctor. And he's like, "Yep, you've got tuberculosis. You don't have very long to live, so good luck. Here's something for the pain." And so it sort of hits Arthur. Well, I was going to say in the gut, but in the lungs, but you know what I mean. And so he realizes that with what's remaining with his life, he needs to decide what he's going to do with it. Because back in the day, he had this lady friend and everything, and they were going to get married, but her father didn't approve. But he had a chance to win her back, and then he sort of blew it because he kept sticking with Dutch. So over like Dutch's descent into madness during this whole thing is sort of egged on by this other loose cannon gang member named Micah Bell, who is sort of a psychopath compared to the rest of them. They have sort of this, at least they think themselves as like sort of noble, not noble, but like, honor among thieves sort of honor kind of a deal to him. This guy is just like, I just want to steal crap and I want to kill people and just, get a rush out of all of it. So Arthur doesn't like him, but he can't get rid of him. And so Micah keeps egging on Dutch to get more and more violent and more desperate, and kind of helps accelerate his descent into madness. So Dutch ends up he's always chasing after that one last score, even though they've lost a considerable number of their gang members at this point. And then there's this one oil magnate that they stole from, who it turns out, because he's rich and doesn't like being stolen from, is sort of helping fund the Pinkerton detectives who are chasing after them. So they hunt down and kill the oil magnate and stir up a hornet's nest, and then end up killing the Pinkerton agents as well, eventually. But they stir up a hornet's nest. Arthur, depending on how you play the game, but the gang sort of scatters for good and they get out of Dodge. They before the big breaking of the Fellowship, as it were, they managed to sneak into the penitentiary and steal John back and John Marston back and all that. But it comes down to a point where the law's on your tail. I think a rival gang is on your tail as well. Or no, the gang is sort of split up. There's a faction that chose Dutch, and then there's a faction that chose Arthur and John, who's not too happy at Dutch for abandoning him several times to die. So the gang kind of splits up as they're being chased down by the law, and you, as Arthur, have a choice whether to go after the gang's stash of gold and try to make a break for it, or to help John and his family. He has a wife, Abigail, and a son, boy. Why am I not remembering? He's Jack. That's what the kid's name is. So you have a choice of either you steal the gold or help John escape. That's sort of the choices for the good and bad ending, regardless of where your honor's at, which, again, I'll get to later. So if you choose either way, you end up in a final confrontation with Micah, who is like your rival at this, or arch rival at this point. So if you choose to go after the money, Micah kills you in a fight. If you choose to go after or to help John escape, you still fight Micah, but then John escapes and you succumb to your tuberculosis after Micah beats you up a bunch. And so that's like the good ending versus bad ending. And so after Arthur dies, the perspective shifts over to John Marston, and this is several years down the line, and he and his family have been sort of on the run, going from place to place, trying to find a place to settle down. And over the course of time, John realizes he needs to give up his life as a sharpshooter and build a new home for his family. So he does that. He builds a cabin with the help of some of the friendly gang members that they reunite with. And then they discover that Micah, who they see is responsible for, the breaking up of their gang and sort of Arthur's death, they discover him hiding up in the mountains, and they're like, all right, we need to get revenge, so let's finish him off once and for all. So John and a couple of the remaining gang members hunt him down, and they discover Dutch is there with them. But it turns out that Micah had at a certain point been captured by the Pinkertons and was leading them, had betrayed the gang and was leading them to the different gang hideouts, whatnot, basically. So they're like, Dutch, this guy's a traitor. You got to let us kill him. And Dutch is like, all right, whatever. So you kill him. And then John goes back to his family and settles down. And that leads up to the events of the next game. So that's...
Well, the previous game, you should say.
Yeah. Next game chronologically in the canon. So that's the broad overview. This is, it's an open world game. It's big. There's lots of side quests and missions that I won't get too much into, but the game is sort of a bit of a walking simulator sometimes. You have to physically walk to places. You have to take care of your horse. You have to feed it, brush it, not run it into trees. And there's some different immersion type things too, where you can go hunting, you can go fishing, you can camp out in the wild. There's rival gangs, there's towns, and little mini side quest things you can do in the towns. And so it's all very, you can play poker and drink with your buddies in the camps. You can sing songs around the campfire. Old West simulator, basically. But some of the things I find really interesting about this game is one of the things I think is really cool is the story structure. So video games can be, I think oftentimes they can be sort of compared to movies in terms of how they are written and how they kind of play out. Because you have your story, you go like the standard, like say shooter, because this is, I think, can be considered an open world shooter, with some mild RPG, but not really RPG elements to it, influences, I guess. But usually with shooters, even with open world, you kind of go from mission to mission, set piece to set piece, and climax, and that's it. And that's kind of what this does.
They'll point you down a direct and specific path through the story.
Yeah.
Even if there's multiple paths through it, it's very clear that there's one intended story.
And this is that, but the way it still follows a lot of those conventions. But what's interesting is that the story is framed like a chapter book, like you're reading a book about these characters in the Old West. And throughout the story, Arthur is writing these things down in his journal. And then John, who takes his journal, continues the story after. And so in each chapter, is when something comes to a head, and then they move on to the next area. So that's kind of interesting too. And kind of like a book, the story doesn't move along that quickly. There's a lot of open world filler stuff you can do. But over the course of time, you really get to know each of the characters. Each of them has like their own miniature arc that plays in the main story, but everything is tied together by the main story of the gang. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of more ways it would tie into because I don't know. And then the whole experience of it really reminded me of more of like an attitude that you would take reading a really immersive novel versus like playing in an action movie, to me, I guess. That's sort of the impression I came away with.
Sure, you just stop and describe the landscape for a bit, and just
Mhm.
kind of take in the scenery.
Or look at a hand sketched, mountain landscape sort of a thing. Like it's like, and you people who've seen it or you watch me play
I
it a
looked
little
over
bit.
your shoulder.
It's a
while you
very very pretty game.
played. Oh yeah,
I think it's like it's a video game, but it does an uncannily good job, especially like in the parts of the country I'm most familiar with is like the Midwest and the Great Plains and some of the mountains, and it really captures the essence and spirit of that and those parts of the map. I've never been to the desert, so I can't really speak to that, but yeah, it's sort of you sort of slowly move your way through this world, interact with people, live, eat, and breathe in it like they do. And then you get to spend a long time with the character and come to identify with them by the gameplay, much like in other video games. But this one, I don't know, it just really gave the feeling like you're reading a really good novel versus playing a really good action game or action movie, as it were. So yeah. See if I had anything else on there, but I mean that's the gist of it. There's some other things too. I'll get into more depth with when we do the transcendental analysis, but so honor is sort of one of the key mechanics in this game, and it's based off of the actions you perform. It's like
it's like your good versus evil meter.
Yeah,
right?
pretty
Where
much.
you do good actions, you do bad actions.
Good actions and bad actions have like different scores based on how severe they are. It's not like a number amount, but it moves your slider up and down.
Right, you got other games like Infamous or something like that has like a in-game like good versus evil counter, like Jedi RPGs or whatever.
Yeah, the Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah. Where it's like you're either dark side or your light side. You put points into one and points to the other. It's very very similar.
And some of the older Fable games have that as well.
Sure.
Yeah, and then BioShock to an extent had sort of a
it
was sort of a proto morality
It wasn't
system.
like a on-screen hovering over your head kind of thing in BioShock.
Mhm.
You knew it was intended to be that is just kind of like in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And not like an on-screen element that changes how things turn out, really.
Yeah. In RDR2, the honor bar only shows up when you do a good or bad action, like, and if you do enough of those actions to move that bar up or down. So if you do enough, bad things, rob people, kill people who, if it's not like self-defense, or just are mean to people, like if you just insult and shout at people and get drunk and make a nuisance of yourself. If you play this game like GTA 5 with horses, you will get negative honor very quickly. But if you make a special effort to slowly over time, be a nice person.
Just shout howdy from your horse.
Yeah, if you yell howdy a bunch and are friendly, you can knock up your honor a bunch. But also, like, the game gives you a bunch of these honor missions, which are side quests that take place in each of the different chapters and regions you're in, where you have the chance to kind of play through these miniature story side arcs. But if you play through them honorably, they'll considerably raise your honor and help you max it out by the end of the game. So the honor, it is, and it does and it doesn't play a huge impact on the game. I mean, just considering, like, with game design, like, you can only have so many only have so many things that split off.
Right.
Like, it's all got to come back together to some sort of end that's similar, because you can only program so many game endings, as it were. I guess you would be able to speak more to this, Riley.
Yeah, it depends really on how much effort you're willing to put into it.
Mm-hmm.
What's a common convention in, like, some of these huge open world games like Skyrim or Fallout 4 or whatever, what's called like a state, a game state thing that you store in a file, and that will basically say this thing has happened, and this thing has happened, etc., for everything that you've done, experienced, or witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the game you can program individual events to respond to that game state.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually make it really complex without having to, like, manually create unique endings for each of the individual tracks you want to have.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
in this
if they'd-
case,
they
this
chose
game
not to put that
isn't
effort in.
as in depth as say a Fallout or a Skyrim per se in terms of like how your choices.
well, this case also has a character with a defining beginning point in the
in
prior
the story.
game, and so you want to gear the entire story to get to that point, right?
Yep.
You
It's
want-
a prequel.
and with
Your character
characters with as many nuanced characters as the game has, and it's fully voice acted,
Mhm.
and it's just a lot more labor intensive to have to.
Yeah, the story itself
make it-
isn't impacted a ton by like the progression of the story itself. Like you can't really change the ending because I mean in the end everyone dies, John escapes and you die. But the manner of your death is up to your choosing, I suppose, whether that's honorably or dishonorably. And also there's a few there's a few mechanical things that happen with high and low honor as well. Like if you have high honor, people in the town are more towns are more friendly to you. They remember if you commit violent crimes in the town because they're all like suspicious of you and don't want anything to do with you. You get discounts in stores if you have really high honor.
And you get the cops called on you when you have really low honor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you get price hikes as well by the same token when you have low honor.
But you also rob more money when you have low honor anyway. So
Yeah. And then
balances.
there's different rewards for picking up valuable items based on each. But then the story impacts your honor. You can still do all the honor missions, but then whether or not those have how you behave in those determines whether or not you have an honorable outcome or dishonorable one.
Mm-hmm.
But for the main story, it's kind of interesting because every now and again, especially as Arthur gets to be, closer and closer to dying, he sort of will drift off and start thinking about things. And he has like these sort of visions, representing, who he is. And it's a little abstract, but kind of reminds me of like who wrote Jack London. It kind of reminds me of a Jack London book in some of these sequences. So there's these sequences where you have these visions of an animal going through the forest briefly, and that animal, if you are honorable, is like a buck chasing the sun's rays. If you have low honor, then you're a black coyote in the rain. In
Is
these
there
sort of daydreams.
Is there a middle thing? Or no, not really?
No, not really.
There's no medium place.
Yeah. Arthur's interactions with the gang members is altered by how honorable or dishonorable he is too. I mean, you can choose different dialogue options, and then like the cutscenes, if you have low honor, he'll be really terse and selfish and be more focused on money and power, and just really selfish. But if you have high honor, then he's looking out for the needs of, the people in the gang that he cares about, or he'll like get really up in arms against the people who are dishonorable in the gang. And so there's a few of the gang members that he helps escape and start new lives besides John and his family. But those are the main ones.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so your higher or low honor determines, how you interact with the world around you. And I'll get more into that in the analysis. But yeah, that's I'm not going to go too in depth with the story. There's some I don't know. I really enjoyed it. And it was sort of a slow burner. I think I played through it faster than a lot of people would have, just because I don't know. When I get into a game, I just sort of lock into it, and my task completing nature really.
But still, it
gets into
took
it,
you
but-
a while to finish it, even though you were,
Yeah, I wasn't like trying to speed run it or anything, but I did.
I wonder how fast an RDR2 speed run is.
I'm sure there's
Well,
ways
with
of
open
finding out.
world games, there's always some kind of crazy exploit that someone has where they
Mhm.
clip through the wall and teleport
Get a thing
into
before
areas
they're
they aren't
supposed
supposed
to,
to be in.
Trigger a
Yeah.
cutscene at the end of the game, like 15 minutes in, and
Mhm.
now they have an item and a condition so that they can go to the final boss or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some shenanigans like that. But yeah, those are, I guess, the main things. I mean, yeah. Well,
much of the fun of an open world game is really just exploring it and experiencing it and just kind of participating in the thing that the developer created.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like the
And
point of
RDR2,
it's like the point of an open world is the open world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And RDR2 is like really in depth with its open world
Mhm.
with the towns and the vast forests and mountains and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say at this point it's pretty safe to say my favorite types of games are open world with good story. I mean, I've played a couple, like Just Cause obviously isn't the most story rich. But RDR2 and then The Witcher, which has some open world aspects to it.
yeah, The Witcher's definitely open world. You know,
Um,
once you get through the main storyline, everything from there is whatever you want to do with it.
I guess, yeah. So the world is very rich and feels very lived in, and one of the ways they achieve that is through this like random encounters mechanic where you'll come across people in different situations, and you can choose whether to help them or press the wrong button and kill them by accident when you're trying to untie them. That happened more than once.
Mm.
Um,
Were
press-
they tied onto railroad tracks?
no, like
No?
like this person was being kidnapped, and I got rid of the kidnapper and tried to untie her, and I ended up kicking her to death by accident because E is untie, or no, I think E and F were untie or kill. And glancing down at the keyboard, I should have better muscle memory. There were moments like that happened where you can accidentally.
You're
If you-
trying to pay her your respects to her, but then
Mm-hmm.
you effed it up.
Yeah, I suppose.
Or rather, you eat it up.
Or no, I think it was hold down or tap, and I
Oh.
tapped instead of held down.
Ah.
That's what it was. Anyway,
Oh.
minor detail, but yeah, the random encounters also help you like with your honor and different things like that, but also helps to achieve the effect. Like there's people going about their lives, and their horse will run off on them while they're trying to get something that's out of its shoe, or get something out of its shoe that's bugging them, different little things like that. Or a lady's like stranded because her horse has died, could you take her to the next town, different things like that. So the world is very lived in. It's easy to like make people angry and try to kill you, like if you walk too close to them or like stand and stare at them for too long. There's a little it's not glitchy, but it's just kind of
Some of the mechanics are kind of finicky.
a little finicky, yeah. But that creates some kind of fun and wild moments that keeps the gameplay fresh. So I suppose that's about the extent of most of the things I like about it. I just really love it's very immersive as a world, and it's sort of it reminded me how much I enjoy the outdoors for a video game. It's like, dang, I miss living in the country. I mean, I didn't like hunt for subsistence or anything, but like kind of like, oh yeah, this is what walking in the woods kind of feels like. I should go home and walk in the woods. But
When it's not cold.
yeah, what do you guys? I mean, we've touched on this a little bit. What are you guys' impressions of RDR2?
I think one of the observations that I have made is that, like, in most of your open world games, the world is a vehicle for side quests.
Yeah.
It's just more space to shove more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in RDR2, side quests are kind of like a vehicle to experience the world.
Experience the
Yeah.
world and develop your character, as it were. Like not through upgrades, but
it's-
like you get to interact with people and develop your
Yeah, it's just
personality,
kind of
as
like,
it were.
you're not defined by your doing, you're defined by your being and your
Mhm.
experiencing,
Yep.
which is a very Catholic notion of how to do life.
Yeah.
You aren't
Yep.
defined by what you do, you're defined by who you are. And,
Mm-hmm.
you're not just going around the world to accomplish things and make money and whatever other your goals are.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to experience the beauty of a place.
Mm-hmm.
And that the game really encourages you to do that the way it's designed.
Yeah.
which
Even
I
though
find
like you are
to
an
be very
outlaw
cool.
and you kind of do things that are morally questionable time and again. I get crap from this certain group of people for the way I typically play video games.
A certain group of people.
That I
A certain
often
group of people being me.
yes. uh, I tend to be sort of mess around and goof off a bunch in ways that are
And
detrimental.
forget that he listened to this sort of online episode.
Yes,
And forget that he watched that show and talked
was
with me about it.
on
And
on the episode.
all that just went zoom right through his head.
Yeah, but in this game, like the consequences of your actions are very much like very palpable in this versus other games where you can kind of.
Right.
I mean, in this one, you can still kind of get around it.
So when there's no consequences, it's fine to do, right?
Well,
It's not like a GTA where after you get wasted,
like the whole point is to be a despotic psychopath.
but like all the negative consequences reset after you die, right?
Yeah, you feel the impact of your actions on the world around you in this
And
game.
I think something interesting about the way the story of this game is laid out is giving your character a terminal illness
Mm-hmm.
is a very natural way to introduce this introspective, what have I done with my life so far
Yeah,
kind of thought, right?
he starts meditating almost on like the kind of person he is.
Right. And so it forces you to look at what kind of person you've made him into
Mm-hmm.
through playing him, right? So it's like you get to this point, he's got a terminal illness now, and so that's when most people would reevaluate their life and look at like, what am I doing and what am I going to do for right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think that's an interesting way to like look at to analyze your behavior throughout the game in a non-gamey, story-driven way.
Yeah,
Because sometimes it's just like, oh, your meter's all the way at the bad side, so you get the bad ending where the guy dies, right?
yeah,
Whereas this is just like, it feels more like the natural conclusion to a book or a story, right?
yeah. And then also like how high or low your honor is when you die and what ending you choose sort of in like the epilogue of the game.
Did you get a bigger gravestone?
The gravestone is different.
Oh.
I think there's like the Bible verse on there changes.
Oh.
Yeah, so if you have a high honor ending, your epitaph reads, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." And then with low honor, it's, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted."
Interesting.
But people also in the epilogue remember you differently based on which ending you chose and how high or low your honor was.
So you get different like eulogies almost from each of the surviving gang members.
More or less, yeah.
That's neat. And
Then
then
the people who knew you well, yeah, or Arthur well.
then
So yeah,
John gets his journal, right? So you can flip
Yeah.
through that, and it kind of gives you a in-game explanation for the passing of the torch and why this character knows all the stuff he knows.
Exactly. So yeah, there's it's very, and for a Rockstar game, they have a reputation, especially the Grand Theft Auto games. But for this game is, there's language and violence, but it's a otherwise pretty clean game. There isn't, the stuff that GTA 5 is known for in there. There's like innuendo and implied stuff, but it's relatively speaking clean in that regard. So
For an M-rated game, yeah.
right. So yeah,
There's not a whole lot to worry about on that front,
no. I mean, obviously there's violence, but
obviously.
that's in a lot of games.
And from what
And
I saw,
language.
it got kind of gritty from time to time.
It did, yeah. It's sort of it's kind of like when we were talking way back in the Logan episode.
Oh,
It's
sure.
sort of like the what was like the there's the type of Western. I'm trying to remember. Was it a post-Western? Was that what they called it?
I don't know.
That kind of feel to it.
But yeah, Logan was very much a Western, but with superheroes.
Yeah.
And hey, the violent gunman died at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this kind of borrows from like the Shootist and other
and
like
Shane.
late time,
Depending
Shane.
on the ending you choose, yeah.
So it kind of like draws inspiration from that kind of a Western.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I suppose with that, we'll get into the transcendental analysis.
Transcendental analysis.
Yes. So for truth, the thing that sticks out to me the most, we talked a lot about the honor system. Um, I think what this game captures well is that, I mean, good and bad person not being like, um, you are either a virtuous person or a what would be like
Vicious.
what's that?
Vicious is
Yeah,
the
you are
word.
virtuous or vicious,
The two
not
V's.
through like big benchmark decision points
But through
by
all the little
themselves.
things that add up.
Yeah, through all the little things that add up. The game mechanics are set up as such, where it reflects that.
And so all the little things you do add up to eventually the big choices.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But it's like the big choices aren't the only thing that define you, or
Yeah.
like they would be in other games. Where it's
And
like,
the big choices aren't even what they are without the little things along the way.
mhm.
Yeah. Which is reflective of real life because, like, you know, we all have, access to, grace through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But then our actions to either choose grace or reject it, to choose God or to sin, are in the everyday little decisions that we make.
And the more we choose one, the easier it is to keep choosing it.
Yeah. And this game is very reflective of that in probably the most realistic way I've seen in a video game in the way it's implemented. So yeah, that's like the biggest nugget, I suppose, to take away. Also, crime doesn't pay is another one. Because like the greed of like the different gang members and like, the descent into madness. Because over time, like at the beginning of the game, Dutch is seen to be sort of like an honorable criminal, but then over time, as he becomes more and more frustrated and things are more and more not going his way, and he's egged on by Micah, he starts doing things that the other members of the gang are like they run into this Italian mob boss in Saint Denis, and then he gets vindictive and feeds him to an alligator, and that like gives everybody like, whoa, Dutch isn't the same guy anymore. To the point where like one of his Dutch's characteristics at the beginning of the game is he's fiercely loyal and wants to protect his family, that is his gang. But then towards the end, he sees the gang members as expendable and starts betraying them or just letting them die. Like when John Marston gets captured by the Pinkertons during the big bank job that went wrong, it's said that Dutch could have done something, but he chose not to, and he just let it happen. And there are a couple times where you're playing as Arthur when you're in some hairy situations, and Dutch just sort of leaves you on your own instead of fighting for you. So over time, his greed and his desire for revenge and ultimately his selfishness is what gets the people he cares about most killed. And
He's chasing after that next big score. He's got to get that high, man.
you got to get that score, that big high, and then they leave a path of destruction in their wake as well.
Because he's never satisfied with what they get, even mostly because it goes wrong. But.
Right, and they make each town, each place too hot to hold them, and end up destroying lives along the way. So, yeah, I guess
Serving self-interests is destructive to not only yourself but everybody else around you.
Mm-hmm. And that's like one of the key themes of the game, I think.
Whereas, if you're high honor Arthur, building bonds and helping people out of situations, it's a lot more good.
Yeah. Let's see. I suppose that's kind of
Speaking of good,
yeah, goodness. I think some of the best moments of goodness in the game, like there's like the parts of the story where like if you choose the good ending, you help. You sacrifice yourself so that another man and his family can try to make a new life for themselves,
as opposed to dying trying to get the new life for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You die a hero, not live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Mm-hmm.
To put it in Batman movie terms.
Yeah. So, you sacrifice yourself in the good ending to allow other people to have a better life and escape a life of crime. Whereas if you choose a bad ending, it's like, you're just another casualty of an unfortunate circumstance, but of let's see what. But then a lot of like the honor missions are where you really get opportunities to do good for others. For example, there's like one where you come across this widow in the woods whose husband had been killed in a bear attack, and then you sort of help her learn how to hunt so she can survive and fend for herself. Then there's see, I'm trying to think of another one. Oh, and like this southern town, there's like these two clans that are sort of constantly at war with each other, kind of like the
Hatfields and McCoys sort
yep,
of thing.
Yep, it's pretty modeled after that feud. There's sort of a Romeo and Juliet situation going on, and so you sort of reluctantly help them, get out of that whole mess. And even though your gang burns one of the family's houses to the ground as part of a revenge mission, like you sort of are able to pick them up out of that and help them escape and start a new life together and get married and all that stuff. So there's different opportunities like that to go out of your, like, to do these things. You have to go out of your way because they're not required for the main story.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go out of your way to help these people, and that increases your honor and and you're a better person for it. But yeah, even though like this is like an outlaw gang, it doesn't shy away from the fact that even though these people see themselves as at worst morally gray, although over time they start to they're kind of aware that they're bad people, but they're just like, oh, it's just a laugh out shows, and then, but over time they do see like, no, there's a reason why this way of life, it's against the law. Excuse me. There's a reason why this way of life is dying out, is because people, this isn't how people are meant to live. There are victims. Arthur tells this story actually close to the end of the game, how he'd actually, back in the day, he'd had a son with this gal, and due to his life of crime, he wasn't able to be with them, but he would check in on him every once in a while, and give him some money and things. But one time when he came back, they had been murdered because somebody randomly decided to rob them. They didn't have anything, so they killed them. And that sort of illustrated to him the senseless violence of this way of life. Because it wasn't because Arthur was a gangster and then they were out to get him. It was just sort of random, depravity. And that sort of was the initial moment now looking back, as he's dying, is like, sort of opened his eyes to the fact like this way of life is like, not good and causes a lot of suffering. So, there's a lot more. I'm not going to, go into everything in the game because obviously I think you should play it if you're down for it. So those are some of the main elements I think are good. Beauty. We touched on it.
The game is pretty gorgeous. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you had it running on decent specs on your computer here.
Yeah. The scenery is great.
It's a good-looking game.
Lots of wildlife.
The lighting is really good. I think that does a lot of the heavy lifting. It's really natural looking.
There's a lot of work that went into this too. A lot of voice lines for all the characters based off of like any of the number of interactions you could have with them. The game is, for a video game, and for the most part, it's really well written. The dialogue is great. The cutscenes are great. And a lot of the times too, like, you're not really in a cutscene so much as you're playing along with what's happening in the story. Not like a quick time moment either. Like a lot of dialogue happens when you're riding horses with the gang between places, But there's the music. Since it's an open world game, there isn't a ton. It's kind of like in Breath of the Wild, like where if you get into a fight, there's different songs that'll play, based on your actions.
But also, you'll just be riding around and you'll hear like a little electric guitar and a little harmonica here and there.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, oh yeah, this feels like a Western. Yeah.
The type of music that plays, like if you're just walking around in the country, it's sort of like a folky banjo guitar, like atmospheric stuff. But then when you're getting into, cowboy shooting things up and fighting and stealing stuff, then it's a lot more of like that spaghetti western, good, bad, and the ugly electric guitar with the extra reverb and whip cracks and stuff like that, kind of like Nathan was saying. But also for story moments, like, for example, like when Arthur realizes like he's going to die and like there's these different sequences, he realizes like there's sort of, especially at the end, there's let's see, at the end as he's like marching to like the big final battle, as it were. There's like there's these different tracks that kind of hits you right in the feels, and you sort of feel with Arthur like this sort of the weight of the moment, and like, you know, you're riding off to do your last hurrah as a cowboy, as it were. So really, it's good stuff. Unity, what brings it all together?
I think the one uniting factor from what I've heard is the world itself.
Yeah.
It's about, like...
This is a living, breathing world. Not just a place, a vehicle, like Riley is saying, for you to do things. But, like, what you do affects the world, and the world affects you. And what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, in a lot of ways, this game is a microcosm of real life that way.
Yeah.
That's pretty unique. Yeah.
When you were telling the story earlier and you got to the part where you got tuberculosis, I had to snicker to myself because I imagined, like in Zelda, when you go into a chest and you pull something out and go hold it over your head, and it's you got tuberculosis.
Da, 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 da.
So I may have snickered back when you did that, because I just
tuberculosis,
that
terminal illness. Scoff.
You're dying. Mortality.
What's interesting too in the part, like when you, over time as you are like sick and dying, you actually can't eat or drink as much to like refill your, you know, your health core, your stamina, and your dead eye, which lets you shoot people in slow motion.
Oh, it's like you're actually losing functions.
Yeah.
As you interesting.
And every once in a while you'll sort of cough and like almost black out at random moments too.
That's one way to increase difficulty toward the end.
Mm-hmm. In ways that are organic. But yeah.
Well, it's his organs failing. So.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, boys?
Nope.
All right.
Other than the fact that it's on my list of games I should probably play at some point. Yeah, not really. I think we hit all the points.
Yeah, try it out. I recommend it. So with that, I guess thanks for listening to Palladium Papists. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Papists. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapists@gmail.com. We'll probably get to some of those suggestions at some point, because there was another suggestion submitted that I haven't decided whether or not I actually want to do an episode on it, but we'll get there.
Oh.
We'll see.
Do tell, this is the first I've heard of it.
Corpse Bride.
What was the other one? Well, that was the second one.
Yeah.
James, you mustn't let your aversion to Tim Burton get in the way of us respecting our audience.
I guess so. I'll give it what is due. I'll engage in the virtue of justice. I'll give it what it's due. Of course, my subjective.
That'll be eventually, though.
Yeah, at an undisclosed date.
Did we talk about Aquaman prior to doing that? We might have.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
Hey, look.
Hey, look, a callback.
Talk to you next week.
Bye.